There once was a wandering poet from the edge of the Greek world who dared to say something almost unthinkable. The gods of Greece were inventions, not divine revelations, not eternal truths, human projections. And in saying this, Xenophanes of Colophon may have become one of the first critics of religion in Western history. But Xenophanes was not just an atheist before atheism. He was something stranger, a philosopher caught between myth and reason, a poet attacking poetry, a religious thinker criticizing religion, a skeptic searching for truth while doubting whether humans could ever truly possess it. He stood at the crossroads between the mythological worldview of Homer and the rational philosophy that would later dominate Greece, and in many ways, modern philosophy begins with him. Xenophanes was born around 570 BCE in the Greek city of Colophon, in Ionia, located in the coast of what is now Turkey. This was not the Greece most people imagined. A world of colonies, merchants, sailors, poets, and constant political instability. And Xenophanes lived through catastrophe. The Persian Empire expanded westward, consuming Greek cities across Ionia. Many people became refugees. Xenophanes himself appears to have spent much of his life wandering from city to city as an exile. He was not a wealthy aristocrat philosopher lecturing in a school. He was a traveling intellectual, a performer, a reciter of poetry, a critic moving through Greek society observing its beliefs from the outside. That outsider status mattered, because distance creates perspective, and Xenophanes began noticing something disturbing about the Greek religion. Every culture imagined the gods in its own image. Xenophanes delivers one of the most famous and devastating critiques in ancient philosophy. Ethiopians say their gods are dark and snub nosed. Thracians say that theirs are blue eyed and red haired. If horses or oxen or lions had hands and could paint, horses could paint gods like horses. This was revolutionary because Xenophanes wasn't merely insulting mythology, he was uncovering a psychological mechanism. Humans create gods in their own image. Religion reflects culture more than reality. The Greeks imagined divine beings who looked Greek. Warrior cultures imagined warrior gods. Kings imagined cosmic monarchies. The divine became anthropology. This insight echoes thousands of years later in thinkers like Ludwig Feuerbach, who argued that God is humanity projected outward, and Sigmund Freud, who interpreted religion psychologically. But Xenophanes saw the core problem over 2 millennia earlier. Humans mistake their own reflection for ultimate truth. To understand how radical Xenophanes was, you have to understand the authority of Homer. For the Greeks, the Iliad and the Odyssey were not just literature, they were cultural scripture. They shaped morality, education, religion, identity, and even concepts of heroism. But Xenophanes thought Homer had corrupted Greek spirituality. He accuses Homer and Hesiod of attributing shameful human behavior to the gods: theft, adultery, deception, violence. This is what that means. The gods were supposed to represent perfection, yet Greek mythology often portrayed them as emotionally unstable superhumans, jealous, vindictive, lustful. Zeus himself constantly lies, cheats, and manipulates. Xenophanes asks an implicit question: if the gods behave worse than humans, why worship them? This has become one of the earliest philosophical critiques of mythological morality. Later philosophers like Plato would continue this attack, especially in the Republic, where Plato argues that stories depicting immoral gods should not educate the young. But Xenophanes planted that seed first. Then Xenophanes proposed something astonishing. Instead of many flawed gods, he speaks of one greatest God, one God greatest among gods and men, neither in body nor in thought like mortals. This statement changed the history of philosophy, because Xenophanes begins moving Greek thought away from anthropomorphic polytheism and toward abstraction. But what exactly is this one God? Scholars still debate it. Was Xenophanes a monotheist, a pantheist, a proto-deist, a theological rationalist? The answer is complicated. His god did not move around physically like Zeus, did not engage in petty drama, did not fight wars or seduce mortals. Instead, he sees all over, he says, thinks all over, hears all over, and, without effort, he shakes all things by the thought of his mind. This god resembles pure intelligence more than a mythological character, an unmoving cosmic mind, a divine principle, something closer to metaphysics than mythology. This idea profoundly influenced later thinkers, especially Parmenides and the Eclectic school. You can even see distant echoes in later concepts of God found in classic theology. Not a giant man in the sky, but an ultimate rational reality. But Xenophanes may have been more important for another reason: epistemology, the study of knowledge. Because Xenophanes realized something terrifying: humans may never fully know the truth. He writes, "No man has seen the clear truth, nor will be there anyone who knows about the gods and all the things I speak of." And then he says, "Even if one were to speak complete truth, one would not know it." He separates truth itself from human certainty. Reality may exist objectively, but human beings remain trapped within limited perspectives and imperfect understanding. This is an early form of philosophical skepticism. Not radical nihilism, not nothing is true. Instead, Xenophanes argues that humans approach truth gradually through inquiry, correction, and better reasoning. Opinion improves over time, knowledge evolves. That idea becomes foundational to philosophy and science itself. Instead of divine revelation guaranteeing certainty, truth becomes a process of investigation, a search. Xenophanes also challenged mythological explanations of nature. He observed seashell fossils far inland and concluded that land had once been underwater. That sounds obvious today, because it is, but in ancient Greece, natural phenomena was still deeply entangled with mythological explanations. Xenophanes instead looked for rational causes. Observations mattered. Evidence mattered. Nature could explain itself without constant divine intervention. This places Xenophanes within the broader movement of the pre-Socratic philosophy, thinkers attempting to understand reality through reason rather than myth. Figures like Thales of Miletus, Anaximander, and Heraclitus were all searching for underlying principles behind the cosmos. But Xenophanes brought up something unique. He turned rational criticism toward religion itself. Xenophanes threatened more than mythology. He threatened authority, because societies are built partly on sacred narratives. If the gods are human inventions, if religious traditions reflect culture rather than truth, if certainty itself is questionable, then political and moral systems lose divine grounding, and this tension never disappeared. You can trace echoes of Xenophanes all throughout the entire history of philosophy, through Socrates questioning Athenian assumptions, through Spinoza identifying God with nature, through David Hume criticizing religious certainty, through Nietzsche declaring the collapse of traditional values, and through modern anthropology, psychology, and comparative religion, Xenophanes opened a door that could never fully be closed again. But Xenophanes contains a fascinating paradox. He destroys certainty, yet still searches for truth. He criticizes religion, yet still speaks of divinity. He attacks mythology, yet writes poetry himself. He is both skeptic and believer, destroyer and seeker, and that complexity is precisely what makes him feel modern, because Xenophanes understood something most extremists do not. Questioning illusions does not automatically eliminate the human need for meaning. Removing false gods does not instantly produce wisdom. Criticism alone is not enough. The deeper question becomes, what replaces illusion once illusion collapses? This question would haunt philosophy for the next 2,500 years. Xenophanes rarely appears in popular discussions of philosophy. He wrote only fragments. Most of his work is lost, just like the other pre-Socratics. He founded no massive empire of thought like Plato or Aristotle, and yet his fingerprints are everywhere. Whenever someone questions whether culture shapes religion, whenever someone doubts inherited truths, whenever someone asks whether humans can ever truly know reality, whenever philosophy turns against myth, Xenophanes is there, a wandering exile from Colophon, the philosopher who dared to suggest that humanity had mistaken its own reflection for the face of God.